In the serene outskirts of Millbrook, a stone's throw from the thriving metropolis of Hartford, Connecticut, a horrendous act disrupted the tranquil suburban tranquility. On a cool autumn day in September 2018, the lifeless form of 17-year-old Sarah Thompson was found in the forest adjacent to her home, a discovery that instilled fear and unease among the locals. Veteran detective Michael Carter, an experienced sleuth from the Hartford Police Department, was assigned to spearhead the investigation. Armed with his keen insight and relentless determination, Carter plunged into the labyrinth of falsehoods and duplicity enshrouding Sarah's homicide. Unbeknownst to him, this case would test his beliefs and compel him to grapple with the bleakest facets of humanity. As the inquiry progressed, initial doubts were cast on Sarah's stepmother, Amanda Wilson. Their strained bond was common knowledge among the neighbors, and Amanda's seemingly envious disposition towards her stepdaughter appeared to supply a reason for the crime. However, this seemingly simple case concealed a convoluted narrative of treachery, clandestine affairs, and lethal repercussions. The epicenter of this calamity was Robert Wilson, Sarah's stepfather, a distinguished entrepreneur and a revered figure in the community. Robert presented himself as the mourning paternal figure, offering solace to his spouse amidst their mutual bereavement. Yet, as Detective Carter would soon unveil, Robert's meticulously crafted veneer hid a network of falsehoods that would eventually result in his ruin. This chronicle recounts a homicide that fractured a family, questioned a detective's judgment, and disclosed the catastrophic outcomes of unbridled yearning and disloyalty. It stands as a sobering caution that often the most menacing predators lurk undetected among us, disguised as ordinary citizens in our very own localities. Sarah Thompson, a lively and gifted adolescent, met a heart-rending demise merely weeks shy of her 18th birthday. Born to single-parent Amanda Thompson in 2001, Sarah matured into an intelligent and inquisitive girl, perpetually eager to absorb knowledge and traverse the world. From her formative years, Sarah exhibited a fervor for art and literature. Her educators frequently lauded her originality and perceptive compositions, identifying her as a pupil brimming with potential. Sarah's creative flair was showcased on the walls of her secondary school, and she had lately ventured into photography, seizing the splendor of nature in the forest behind her residence, the very same woods that would tragically become the location of her premature end. Despite her scholastic and artistic triumphs, Sarah's domestic life was far from idyllic. At the age of 12, her mother wed Robert Wilson, a prosperous local entrepreneur. While Sarah initially embraced the constancy that Robert introduced to their family, the rapport between stepdaughter and stepfather deteriorated as Sarah transitioned into adolescence. Companions and schoolmates portrayed Sarah as benevolent yet resolutely self-reliant. She boasted a close-knit circle of companions and was recognized for her stance against intimidation in school. Sarah's bond with her mother, Amanda, had always been intricate. As an only offspring, Sarah had been the focal point of Amanda's existence for years. However, Robert's entrance into their lives triggered a transformation in their relationship. Sarah frequently sensed that her mother favored her recent nuptials over their maternal connection, resulting in recurrent disputes and emotional detachment. In the weeks preceding her demise, those in Sarah's inner circle observed a transformation in her behavior. She grew more reserved, dedicating more time to solitude in her chamber, or meandering in the woods with her camera. Her artwork reflected somber subjects, and her usually diligent academic performance started to decline. Sarah's closest confidant, Emily, recalled Sarah appearing preoccupied and troubled. Yet, when queried, Sarah would dismiss apprehensions with a feigned grin and a diversion of topic. Unbeknownst to anyone at the time, Sarah had unearthed a secret that would ultimately cost her life. Driven by her pursuit of authenticity and innate inquisitiveness, she had discovered something that someone was prepared to eliminate, to conceal. Sarah Thompson's youthful existence, brimming with assurance and capacity, was extinguished just as she was on the verge of maturity. She departed, leaving behind a grieving society and an enigma that would rattle Millbrook's foundation. Robert Wilson, 45 years old at the time of Sarah's slaying, projected himself as the embodiment of suburban prosperity. An appealing and esteemed financial consultant, Robert had established a flourishing practice in Hartford, overseeing the finances of some of the city's most wealthy inhabitants. His refined appearance and self-assured manner made him a natural head figure in the community, partaking in the local Chamber of Commerce and mentoring junior soccer. Born into a blue-collar household in Boston, Robert ascended the social hierarchy through an amalgamation of allure, intellect, and relentless drive. He crossed paths with Amanda Thompson at a philanthropic event in 2012, and their whirlwind courtship reached its zenith in matrimony a mere 8 months later. To onlookers, Robert seemed to be the quintessential spouse and stepfather, bestowing stability and fiscal assurance upon Amanda and Sarah. However, beneath the facade of triumph and esteem, Robert concealed sinister secrets and unmet aspirations. The allure of his union with Amanda had swiftly waned, and he found himself enticed by the thrill of a clandestine liaison. For the past year, Robert had been immersed in a fervent affair with Elena Gonzalez, the spouse of his adjacent neighbor and confidant, David. Robert's relationship with Elena transcended mere physical attraction. He felt invigorated in her company, experiencing a bond he thought he had never found with Amanda. The two paramours would rendezvous covertly, pilfering moments of ardor while their partners were occupied or attending to chores. Robert became adept at deception and manipulation to sustain his dual existence. As Sarah approached the end of her adolescence, Robert felt progressively uneasy around her. Her discerning character and sharp eye for particulars rendered him anxious that she might expose his unfaithfulness. He started evading one-on-one time with his stepdaughter, concocting pretexts to evade family suppers and gatherings. Comrades and associates portrayed Robert as captivating and benevolent, always equipped with a quip or a lending hand. David Gonzalez, oblivious to Robert's treachery, frequently extolled him as the optimal neighbor and companion a person could desire. Robert's clients had implicit faith in him, captivated by his self-assured guarantees and remarkable accomplishments. Yet those who knew Robert intimately detected an underlying sentiment of displeasure. His assistant at the financial institution remarked on his mounting irritability and absent-mindedness in the months preceding Sarah's demise. Robert's college friend of many years, Mark Stevens, noted that Robert appeared to be living precariously, as though perpetually glancing over his shoulder. Unbeknownst to anyone, behind Robert Wilson's meticulously constructed persona dwelt a man capable of unspeakable deeds, propelled by desperation to safeguard his secrets and uphold his lifestyle at any expense. On the morning of September 15, 2018, a chilling discovery was made by a jogger traversing his customary path through the woods adjacent to the Wilson household. Beneath a crude amalgamation of foliage and branches lay the remains of Sarah Thompson, inadequately concealed and bearing evidence of a ghastly crime. Detective Michael Carter arrived at the scene within an hour. His seasoned gaze absorbed every particular. Indications of a brutal altercation were visible on Sarah's body. Contusions blemished her limbs and visage, and defensive injuries on her hands suggested a frantic struggle for survival. The fatal wound was unmistakable, a laceration across her throat, seemingly inflicted by a serrated edge. As the forensic specialists scoured the vicinity for clues, Carter observed several significant details. Sarah's camera, an essential accessory during her forest explorations according to her acquaintances, was absent. Traces of dragging and disrupted flora implied that the corpse had been relocated from the original crime scene, possibly to evade swift detection. Most revealingly, there were no indications of sexual assault, prompting Carter to infer a personal motive for the homicide rather than a random act. The ferocity of the assault hinted at a crime fueled by emotion, someone acquainted with Sarah and propelled to a moment of uncontrollable wrath. As the news of the murder circulated, the once tranquil Millbrook community succumbed to a state of apprehension and mistrust. Neighbors who had previously neglected to secure their homes now meticulously inspected their safety measures. Parents confined their offspring indoors, and the woods that had once served as a recreational haven became off-limits, demarcated by yellow police tape. Detective Michael Carter, a seasoned investigator with 20 years of service at the Hartford Police Department, assumed control of the inquiry with unwavering resolve. Recognized for his methodical strategy and uncanny knack for discerning links overlooked by others, Carter had resolved some of the department's most perplexing cases. As he positioned himself in the Wilson sitting room, examining the family portraits on the mantelpiece, he realized that this case would challenge him like no other. The initial 48 hours of the investigation unfolded in a flurry of activity. Carter and his colleagues conducted preliminary interviews with relatives, companions, and neighbors. Sarah's academic records were inspected, her social media profiles examined, and her actions in the days preceding her demise were meticulously retraced. Robert Wilson, seemingly stunned, offered a comprehensive narrative of his location on the night of the homicide. He asserted that he had been laboring late at his workplace, a claim substantiated by security recordings and his assistant's statement. Amanda Wilson, still noticeably upset, endeavored to preserve her poise during her interrogation. She conceded that she had quarreled with Sarah the day prior to her vanishing, but maintained that it was merely ordinary maternal-daughter discord. As Carter probed further, an image surfaced of a family beset by strain. Neighbors recounted recurrent disputes between Sarah and her mother, their elevated voices frequently resonating across well-groomed yards. Sarah's closest companion, Emily Chen, disclosed that Sarah had been progressively discontented at home, sensing confined and misconstrued. The forensic team's preliminary discoveries presented more puzzles than resolutions. Trace evidence discovered on Sarah's attire didn't correspond to samples obtained from Robert or Amanda. The murder weapon, presumably a hunting knife or comparable serrated blade, remained elusive despite an exhaustive exploration of the Wilson property and adjacent regions. A significant development transpired when Carter questioned Elena Gonzalez, the Wilsons' adjoining neighbor. Elena, visibly anxious during the conversation, mentioned that she had witnessed Sarah arguing with Amanda in the driveway the day preceding her disappearance. More intriguingly, Elena inadvertently revealed that Amanda had always appeared envious of her daughter's youthfulness and attractiveness. This data, combined with the turbulent domestic atmosphere and Amanda's uncertain alibi for the night of the murder, prompted Carter to concentrate his efforts on Sarah's mother. He hypothesized that accumulated animosity had ultimately erupted, culminating in a confrontation that proved fatal. As the inquiry entered its second week, Carter felt assured that they were pursuing the correct lead. He procured a warrant to examine Amanda's private possessions and correspondences, hoping to discover the pivotal piece of evidence that would unravel the case entirely. Nevertheless, a persistent uncertainty lingered in Carter's consciousness. Robert Wilson's composed disposition and impeccable alibi struck him as excessively orderly, excessively opportune. Unbeknownst to Carter, his intuition was guiding him towards a reality far more ominous than he could have conceived. As the inquiry advanced, all indications appeared to implicate Amanda Wilson as the principal suspect in her daughter's homicide. Detective Carter, impelled by the available evidence, commenced constructing a case against the 42-year-old homemaker with a turbulent history. Carter's squad unearthed a sequence of acrimonious text interactions between Amanda and Sarah in the weeks preceding the murder. In one particularly bitter altercation, Amanda accused Sarah of attempting to undermine her marriage, while Sarah retorted, labeling her mother a pitiful, envious elderly woman. These digital morsels seemed to substantiate the notion of a familial relationship that had reached its boiling point. Additional suspicion was aroused by Amanda's conduct following Sarah's demise. Initially devastated, she swiftly became guarded and evasive during interrogations. Her alibi for the night of the murder was feeble. She asserted that she had been at home alone viewing television, with no one to substantiate her account. An examination of the Wilson residence revealed a diary concealed in Amanda's bedside drawer. Entries chronicled her escalating animosity towards Sarah, bemoaning the girl's allure and the consideration she garnered from Robert. One unsettling passage stated, "Occasionally, I yearn for her to vanish. Our existence would be significantly improved without her incessant presence, her critical gaze." The prosecution against Amanda appeared to gain momentum when a neighbor reported witnessing her arrive home in the wee hours of the morning on the day Sarah's corpse was found. Amanda had no justification for this late-night venture, asserting she must have been sleepwalking, a condition she had never referenced before. As the circumstantial evidence accumulated, Carter experienced mounting pressure from his higher-ups and the press to apprehend a suspect. The community, paralyzed by terror, clamored for justice for Sarah. Amanda Wilson, once an object of sympathy, transformed into the object of public animosity and mistrust. Carter, despite his burgeoning conviction of Amanda's culpability, couldn't suppress a persistent reservation. Her despair and trepidation during interrogations didn't coincide with the methodical murderer he believed had perpetrated this crime. Nevertheless, armed with the evidence, he readied himself to make an arrest. On a drizzly Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the discovery of Sarah's remains, Amanda Wilson was apprehended. As she was escorted from her residence in handcuffs, she vehemently declared her innocence, her pleas reverberating through the astonished neighborhood. Robert Wilson observed from the entrance, his countenance an inscrutable facade, as his spouse was seated in the rear of a police vehicle. Unbeknownst to Carter, in his quest for justice, he had been deceived by a masterfully executed deception, allowing the genuine killer to conceal his traces. The prosecution against Amanda Wilson appeared infallible, but Detective Michael Carter couldn't dispel the sensation that something was awry. It was a minor particular, easily disregarded, that ultimately directed him towards the truth. While scrutinizing security footage from establishments near the Wilson home, Carter noticed Robert's vehicle departing his office parking lot considerably earlier than he had asserted on the night of the murder. Intrigued by this inconsistency, Carter decided to delve deeper into Robert Wilson's existence. He re-interviewed Robert's associates and clients, focusing more closely on the man's actions and connections. It was during a discussion with Robert's assistant that Carter chanced upon a pivotal piece of data. Robert had been making recurrent unexplained visits to a cafe on the opposite side of town, invariably during his lunch hour. Surveillance of the cafe unveiled a shocking revelation. Robert was regularly encountering Elena Gonzalez, his neighbor's wife. The two exhibited a closeness that transcended amicable neighborly relations. Carter had exposed Robert's clandestine affair. Armed with this fresh knowledge, Carter sought another conversation with Elena. When presented with proof of the affair, Elena succumbed to her emotions, divulging the details of her connection with Robert. They had been romantically involved for over a year, seizing opportunities to be together whenever possible. Elena, consumed by remorse, confessed that she had lied in her prior testimony to shield Robert. The affair shed new light on Robert's alibi for the night of the murder. Elena verified that they had indeed rendezvoused that evening, contradicting Robert's assertion of working late. This disclosure demolished the meticulously crafted timeline Robert had offered. As Carter probed deeper into the relationship between Robert and Elena, he discovered a network of falsehoods and clandestine meetings. Bank statements indicated that Robert had recently inquired about transferring substantial funds offshore. Email correspondences suggested plans for a new life together, distant from their spouses and obligations. Detective Carter was now confronted with a distressing query. Could Robert Wilson, the bereaved stepfather, truly be Sarah's murderer? The motive remained unclear, but the flaws in Robert's immaculate facade were starting to emerge. Carter acknowledged that he had been so engrossed in Amanda's case that he had nearly overlooked the genuine narrative unfolding before his eyes. The decisive moment in the investigation originated from an unanticipated source. Sarah's closest companion, Emily Chen, approached Detective Carter with a petite leather-bound journal, Sarah's personal diary. Emily, racked with guilt, admitted that she had initially concealed the diary, fearing it might blemish Sarah's reputation. But as doubt loomed over Amanda, Emily understood that the truth held greater importance than safeguarding her friend's secrets. Carter devoted a sleepless night to examining Sarah's intimate reflections. The diary depicted a vivid image of a young woman contending with a harrowing revelation. In entries dating back several months, Sarah chronicled her escalating suspicion that her stepfather was engaged in an extramarital affair. She recounted observing fleeting glimpses of covert text messages, eavesdropping on muffled phone conversations, and detecting Robert's progressively unpredictable conduct. The most incriminating entry surfaced merely 3 days prior to Sarah's homicide. In tremulous penmanship, she detailed trailing Robert one evening and observing him in a tender embrace with Elena Gonzalez. Sarah expressed her revulsion and deception, wavering about whether to challenge Robert or inform her mother. This disclosure supplied the missing component of the enigma. Sarah had uncovered Robert's infidelity, offering a clear incentive for murder. Robert, a man who had constructed his existence on meticulously preserving appearances, confronted the prospect of forfeiting everything: his matrimony, his standing, and his fiscal security. Equipped with this fresh data, Carter revisited the forensic evidence. He instructed a more meticulous examination of Sarah's attire, specifically seeking trace evidence that might have been disregarded. The findings were enlightening. Fibers discovered on Sarah's jacket corresponded with those from a scarce wool blend utilized in Robert's costly suits. Additionally, a reevaluation of Sarah's phone records displayed a sequence of calls to Robert's office number on the day of her disappearance. The calls were transient, implying Sarah might have been attempting to confront her stepfather or schedule a meeting. Carter also unearthed that Robert had acquired a hunting knife from a neighborhood sporting goods retailer merely a week before the murder. The knife, suspiciously absent from the Wilson residence, coincided with the type of weapon presumed to have been employed in the crime. As the components assembled, Carter comprehended the magnitude of Robert's deception. He had not only manipulated his family and society, but had also adroitly diverted the entire investigation towards Amanda. The investigator experienced a blend of admiration for Robert's craftiness and revulsion towards his ruthless actions. With escalating evidence implicating Robert Wilson as the perpetrator, Carter recognized the urgency to act swiftly. The man who had once been esteemed as a pillar of the community was now unveiled as a calculating murderer, prepared to sacrifice his stepdaughter to safeguard his secrets. Detective Carter resolved to confront Robert Wilson at his workplace, distanced from the inquisitive gaze of neighbors and the press that had been encamped outside the Wilson home. As Carter and his colleague entered the lavish surroundings of Robert's financial advisory company, they discovered him amidst a client consultation, the epitome of professional decorum. In a tone scarcely audible, Robert commenced speaking. He recounted Sarah confronting him in the forest, menacing to reveal his affair to Amanda and Elena's spouse. He portrayed the frenzy that seized him, the dread of losing everything he had strived for. With tears cascading down his visage, Robert narrated how he had struck out in despair, permanently muting Sarah. The admission flowed from him, a deluge of remorse and self-revulsion. Robert detailed how he had meticulously devised a scheme to incriminate Amanda, exploiting the recognized discord between stepmother and stepdaughter. As Carter apprehended him, Robert's sole utterances were a fractured entreaty. "Don't disclose to Elena. Please don't let her become aware of what I've committed." The once esteemed individual was escorted from his workplace in handcuffs, his existence disintegrating around him as the reality of his deeds ultimately emerged. Following a 2-week trial and a mere few hours of contemplation, the jury returned with a guilty verdict on all charges, encompassing first-degree murder. The judge, referencing the savage character of the crime and Robert's deliberate endeavors to mislead investigators, condemned him to life imprisonment without the prospect of parole. Justice had been administered, but for those whose lives had been devastated by Robert's actions, the injuries would necessitate considerably more time to mend. Ultimately, the case of Robert Wilson serves as a testament to the tenacity of the human spirit when faced with unbearable loss, the unwavering quest for justice, and the enduring capacity of a young woman's voice, even when hushed, to eventually disclose the truth.